Okay. Hi, my name is Nathan Lane. I'd like to welcome you all here tonight. I'd like to thank Together We Will, Southwest Ohio, for co-sponsoring, co-hosting, co-moderating the event. I guess not hosting. Co-moderating the event. I appreciate their support, helping us out. If we could give them a small round of applause. Tonight we're going to have this forum structured into 5 distinct segments. We're going to have introductions and opening statements from each of the candidates. Each candidate will get 2 minutes to speak about themselves and about their candidacy. Then we will move on to some prepared questions about the Green Party 10 key values. Each candidate will speak to each of the Green Party's key values, the importance of each value to themselves personally and to you as a candidate, and how you would incorporate these values into office when you are elected. Notice I say when you are elected and not if you are elected. There will be 30 seconds allotted for each candidate for each of the 10 key values. Each candidate will speak to each value before we move on to the next question. Then we will move on to an online question period. Questions that were submitted to Together We Will, Southwest Ohio, and to the Hamilton County Green Party will be submitted to each candidate for response. And again, we'll try to limit the responses to 30 seconds per candidate per response. Then we're going to move into a question and answer session that will be live with anybody who is here presently, as well as anybody who's watching the live streams that we have going online. So first off, we'll go into introductions, and we'll just start here closest to myself. Would you like to introduce yourself, Brett?
Sure. Hello, my name is Brett Joseph, and I am running for Lieutenant Governor of the state of Ohio with my esteemed person to the right here, Constance Gaddel-Newton, who you'll hear from in a moment. The reason I'm running for office is that I care deeply about the people and natural heritage of our beautiful state of Ohio. At the same time, I'm deeply concerned about the present opportunities that we have being squandered due to a lack of policy framework in which to secure healthy, sustainable livelihoods and a better future for all Ohioans. I'm confident that as a team, we will bring to the table the kind of experience, temperament, and vision and integrity that is needed for the governor's office. And at this time in our state's history, we aim to assume the generational responsibility to change the equation between government and the people of this state. And that means we need to change the whole mindset away from scarcity-based thinking to thinking in terms of assets, the abundance that we have right before us that we're not utilizing as a basic framework for a statewide administration and a political economy that's based on collaboration and the sharing of true value. As fellow citizens who aspire to build electoral strength and to win the state's highest office for all our people, we are eager to have this conversation with all of you, a conversation that leads to real solutions. The policies of this state over the past several decades have been really a disaster. It's because the social and economic ideology upon which these policies are built are deeply flawed. I'm talking about privatization, deregulation, trickle-down economics, welfare programs that are really key to community deficiencies rather than community assets, and now, most recently, politics that are not even based on real facts, but are based on the equivalent of brand marketing. So our campaign is about the truth, about facts, it's about integrity. We will not be fooled again. We won't be forced to accept the false choices between jobs and the environment. And we're not buying into the empty promise that massive deregulation, massive tax cuts for the rich, and closed-door immigration policies, that those will create jobs, when the very corporate interests that control both major parties are making obscene profits precisely by cutting labor costs and imposing what I call the art of the deal as a stand-in for the real economy. So I'm running because we need leadership that will bring us a sustainable economy, a real economy that is based on public-private partnership, transparent and scientifically informed decision-making, and clear rules of the game. I'm running because with this kind of leadership that really comes from the citizens, from the bottom up, we have an opportunity to move towards developing real solutions that engage citizens in the creation of value, that create not just jobs but livelihoods, that provides equitable opportunities for the pursuit of happiness as a right of all citizens, and achieves real economic efficiency. And instead of just cost minimization, we're looking at long-term investments in the ecological viability by valuing clean air, clean water, toxic-free soils, and a long-term viable future for our citizens. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Brett. We'll give 3 minutes to opening statements. I believe maybe 2 minutes was a little tight. We can be a little flexible here. So.
Hi, my name's Constance Gaddel-Newton. I'm really happy to be here tonight. I'm running for governor of Ohio as the Green Party candidate. I am a criminal defense attorney in Columbus. I've been with the Green Party since 2008 when we got Cynthia McKinney on the ballot for president and did a lot of election integrity activities in Columbus. So we did a lot of voter protection activities, video the vote, and because we had party status, we were able to get observers in to observe the vote on election day. So as a criminal defense attorney, I am representing a lot of everyday people, and I'm able to see how policies affect people in their daily lives. So I see how the opiate epidemic has played out. I'm representing people in misdemeanor and felony cases, and I also represent parents and children who are part of the foster care system. So I sometimes represent victims of human trafficking, and I know that that is an issue that is not often talked about in Ohio, but it is a pretty big problem in Ohio. So I'm running as a Green Party candidate to protect our clean air, water, and soil. We want to make sure that these environmental issues receive the attention that they're due, because a lot of the Democrats and Republicans are not, doing their job to protect the environment. Water is a huge issue in Ohio, so we want to make sure that local communities are able to control whether there's fracking in their areas. So I support community bill rights. And also want to make sure that Ohioans have their basic needs met no matter what is going on in Washington, D.C. So whatever the federal government decides about health care, decides, trying to have harsh criminal sanctions or immigration policies, we want to make sure that here in Ohio, we do our best to make sure that the people of Ohio have their basic needs met, that we have universal health care in Ohio, that we have a good quality public education system from preschool to community college, that we have a qualified workforce that is not disqualified from working by harsh criminal sanctions. So those are the types of policies that we're putting into action. We want to bring back incentives for green energy in Ohio that were taken away by the Kasich administration. And so I would appreciate I appreciate your support, and thank you for allowing me to be here tonight. Thank you for Together We Will for joining with the Green Party and finding out more about the candidates. Thank you.
Hi, my name is David Brenner, and I'm running for Cincinnati Public Schools Board of Education this year. I am a Cincinnati native. I've lived here my entire life. I am a proud graduate of Cincinnati Public Schools. I went to Walnut Hills. Go Eagles. I've worked professionally in some of the largest companies in the city. And one of the things that I noticed was that regardless of how large the company is, what their budget is, the problems are the same. The question is, how much money do you have to solve those problems? The last 10 years of my career has been in strategic planning, so looking at things long term and understanding where we are, where we want to be, and how to get there. So I live here in Cincinnati with my wife and 4 children who are all students in Cincinnati Public Schools. And when my wife and I started our family, we decided to live in the city specifically because of Cincinnati Public Schools. So when we decided that I was going to throw my hat in the ring this election season, I went out and I spoke to a lot of people, and I learned some new things, and I confirmed some things that I thought I knew. One thing is we often focus too much on the negative. We have a great district. We have dedicated teachers. We have involved parents. We have wonderful students. But we also have a number of challenges. We have a poverty problem in this city, highlighted by the fact that 80% of the children in our district are on free or reduced lunch. We've created a two-tier education system where you either go to a magnet or you go to a neighborhood school, and you often have a perception of a lesser education. It's hard to get information about the district from the district. There is a distinct lack of communication, and parents find out lots of their policy information sitting together on the sidelines of soccer games talking to each other. That's not the way we should get information from our district. So I'm running on a platform of we need greater collaboration, we need greater communication, we need better transparency, and we need evidence-based policy making. In my first 30 days, I'm going to put forth a policy that board members will visit every school and community council meeting every year. That works out to about 2 meetings per month per board member, and I think that's the absolute least we can do for our constituency. And with that, you know, when I talk to my children, I tell them that they can sit around and they can complain about things, or they can get up and do something about it. I've decided to get up and do something about it, and I thank you for your support.
All right, Tamie.
Thanks, David. My name is Tamie Sullivan, and I am a candidate for Cincinnati City Council. Serving on Cincinnati City Council will not be a stepping stone for me to another office. Rather, serving at City Hall will be the culmination of the work I've done for almost 30 years in our community, and I really believe and feel called to serve in this way. I'm committed to Cincinnati, its neighborhoods, its residents, and really all the great things that are happening here. Cincinnati is my home. I was born and raised here. I went to the University of Cincinnati, and I've spent nearly 30 years working on our community's most challenging issues like drug addiction, poverty, child welfare, economic inclusion. I have worked in the private sector and the public sector. I've worked in government at a chamber of commerce. I've had my own small business for almost 20 years, and even in my path, I was executive director of a nonprofit. So I've seen these issues from a variety of angles, and I've always been about finding solutions that work. Some of the things I've done in the course of my career, I helped start the St. Vincent de Paul Charitable Pharmacy. When I was in Leadership Cincinnati, I helped to create a group that was a partnership between Cincinnati Works, Lighthouse Youth Services, and others to help kids aging out of foster care at the age of 18 to find the next step. It's called the Next Step program, and it still exists 10 years later at Cincinnati Works. Right now, I'm most concerned about our community's opiate epidemic, and I do have almost 30 years advocating for prevention and treatment in our community. And this is an issue that's affecting everything else, from workforce to child welfare, law enforcement, criminal justice, healthcare, all of it. So I am somebody who does fill a knowledge and activist gap at City Hall. This is a very complicated issue, and I bring years of experience and expertise to the council race that other candidates don't offer when it comes to the opiate epidemic. I'm running as an independent. I'm also, of course, endorsed by the Green Party, the FOP, and the Cincinnati Women's Political Caucus so far. I chose to be an independent because I've always worked with both sides of the aisle to get things done. I am very moderate and believe that, especially on the tough issues, we have to work together to solve them. And I see our country as being divided in so many ways already. So to me, this is a great place for me to land, and I'm very proud of that, and I thank the organizations who are here making it possible tonight. Thank you.
Hey, Brian.
Brian, Garry, and is this thing even on? Okay. So I guess I'm a little bit different than most for a lot of different reasons. The first reason being where I was born, where I was raised. I was born and raised in Bond Hill, which is a predominantly African-American neighborhood by my mother, who is here with us, one of the strongest feminists in our city, past, I guess, vice president of NOW, National Organization of Women, and president of the Cincinnati Women's Political Caucus and founding member. I was born and raised in Bond Hill. That's significant because most people who are white are raised in an all-white area. Most people who are black are raised in an all-black area. Cincinnati is one of the most racially segregated cities in the entire nation. We're maybe like fifth most segregated city. I'm running because I want to change the heart of our city. The problem isn't that we have a lack of funds, or we have a deficit, or we make decisions as to what we want to do with our money. And if we have a deficit, it's because we've spent the money on something, whatever it is that we've spent it on. But we need to realign our budget with our values. Right now, as far as I'm concerned, our budget is not aligned with our values. Cincinnati is also the second most poverty, I won't say poverty-stricken, because that means that something happened to you. I'd say poverty intentional, because we've made choices. We've made budgetary choices to place people in poverty. We're also one of the most polluted cities in the country. And again, we've made decisions for our clean air standards and the number of air inspectors that we have and how that they go out and deal with companies who are polluting. I think that the biggest issue that we face as a city is undoubtedly poverty. It can be no other issue. Our city is in 50% at or near poverty. If you're African American, 74% of our African American children are in poverty. And we can change this simply by realigning our budget with our values. As an example, less than 1% of our money right now goes to human services, goes to the poor. They got 99% going to everything else. And I have fought personally, and we saved human services a cut of $350,000, and instead we added $350,000. And they also tried to close a health clinic and close the visiting nurses program, which visits new and expecting mothers. We fought that, and we won. So there's many issues that we can fight, and I know Dorsey's been in the fight for many, many years, and we fought a lot of things and won, like they tried to close the clinics before. And so together, we will win. Thank you.
Okay. Real quick, Glenn. We have a candidate who is endorsed by the Green Party this year, and he's not present this evening. His name is Christopher Smitherman, and he's been endorsed by the Green Party on 2 previous occasions. We've worked with him on many issues over the years. And Gwen Marshall, the co-chair of the Hamilton County Green Party, would like to say a few words about why we chose to endorse Chris Smitherman for a 3rd time.
Okay, so I'm actually, can you untangle that thing? Oh, wait a second, I found it closer. Yeah. Don't want to knock things over here. I actually founded the Green Party here in Cincinnati, Ohio, and we didn't actually become a Green Party until 2008. But before that, we were a PAC, and before that, we were working with Chris Smitherman. And the first thing Chris Smitherman did when he got on City Council was right after the death of Nathaniel Jones in the White Castle parking lot. With Chief Stryker's men doing that, he told Chief Stryker right there at a city council meeting, "You are accountable to city council." That did not go well. And that's the reason that Chris had some of the issues that he had to have in the beginning. Then I worked with Chris Smitherman, and the Green Party did as well, on stopping the jail. Remember that big mega jail they were going to put here in Cincinnati to import prisoners from 2 states and out of our area. We fought that. Chris organized a coalition with more conservative forces, which is what a lot of people seem to know him as, is a conservative. But he's like me. We're willing to work with people on things that we agree with them on, and that's exactly what he did. Then when the Democrat coalition on city council was saying that it wants its streetcar, not understanding opportunity cost. You can't have it all. The first thing they tried to do was sell off our waterworks, then they tried red light cameras, then they tried to sell off our parking, and Chris Smitherman was there, and these things are not here now. And the pension is a big issue for him. He worked very hard on getting the MSD deal that we've got. If we lose our pension fund here in Cincinnati, we will lose everything else because we will end up in receivership, and our employees will end up destitute after they retire. They aren't on Social Security. They aren't on Medicare. And these are the kinds of things that Chris is working on. Unfortunately, right this minute, he's working on a pressing family matter, a health issue within his family. And that's the reason that he's not with us tonight. He's always here in spirit, and he's done a great job. And that's the reason the Green Party endorsed him. And also, Waterworks told us, when I was on a waterworks tour, that the reason that they've got a lead abatement program funded was Chris called them into his committee and demanded answers. They said, we need money. Chris got them the money. So people who wonder why the Green Party would endorse Chris Smitherman don't know Chris Smitherman. We know him, and that's why we're endorsing him. So he won't be able to answer your questions tonight, and that's why I took a little longer than the people who get to answer questions.
All right, thank you very much. I would also mention, as an aside, that Christopher Smitherman has been involved in many citizen referendums over the course of the years. So on a very key Green Party value of grassroots democracy, Christopher Smitherman has always walked the walk. On that very issue, actually, we're now going to move into the question and answer session, where we're focused on the Green Party 10 key values. The 10 key values are actually on a banner right over there on the wall. So for those of you that don't have those memorized, they're there for your reference. But I will go through each value individually and give a short description of them. And if each one of you as a candidate could respond for about 30 seconds and say basically what you feel about the value, how it applies to you yourself as an individual and as to your candidacy, and how you would apply that value when you are elected to office. So the first key value that we're going to ask a question on is grassroots democracy. It's one of the Green Party's key values, and it states that all human beings must be allowed a say in decisions that affect their lives. No one should be subject to the will of another. We work to improve public participation in every aspect of government, and we seek to ensure that our public representatives are fully accountable to the people who elect them. We also work to create new types of political organizations that expand the process of participatory democracy by directly including citizens in decision making. So we'll start at the far end here now. Brian, if you could go first.
Sure. There's so many things we can do to increase participatory democracy, grassroots democracy. As an example, voting day should obviously be a holiday like it is in most of the world. In fact, it could be a weekend. It could be a full week. I mean, essentially, it's sort of a month, but the voting hours are very limited. We could indeed even vote on the internet, and my 30 seconds is up.
When it comes to grassroots democracy, the right to vote is number one, and voter access and certainly transparency. When I talk to people, I say, I really hope you'll vote for me, but most of all, vote, because I think that is the most important. When it comes to day-to-day, what I would do as a candidate, I think that our 52 neighborhoods are very important, and I would work very hard on neighborhood engagement.
Ready? When I think of grassroots democracy, I think of we the people, and I believe that an individual can make a difference. My campaign is the definition of grassroots. When I started running, I thought it was important to run a campaign where I could do the right thing instead of doing something that big donors wanted. So I'm only taking donations from individuals. I have not been taking money from PACs to avoid the encumbrance that comes along with that. And we are doing all of our own work for most of our materials in the makerspace downtown. As far as running this in the after I'm elected, I talked earlier about collaboration and communication. That's key to what I want to bring.
Thank you. So one important thing that the Green Party is doing, and that I intend to do in my race for governor, is just to keep the ballot line open for people to run as Greens. So we're looking right now to recruit as many candidates as we can, and so we're basically, since we have ballot access as the Green Party, we're able to offer that to activists to run so that they can promote their issue on an electoral level. We also support the Community Bill of Rights and other activist issues, and as an attorney, I'm often in a position where I'm defending activists who've been arrested for civil disobedience. So I'm actively protecting people's right to free speech and to petition their government. Thank you.
So grassroots democracy is really at the core of our campaign. It's really one of those fundamental issues that needs to change. So in a sense, it's a heavy lift, but it makes all the difference. What it involves is we need to shift the whole paradigm away from zero-sum, winner-take-all politics to coalition building. So reform of the voting system is one thing. Also, as was mentioned, I think every one of us as a Green Party candidate is committed to taking money out of politics, not being beholden to corporate interests. But beyond that, we also need to create conditions that support a thriving democracy. That involves investment, critical thinking skills, and social infrastructure at the community level with multiple pathways for people to participate.
All right. I think it's pretty apparent 30 seconds is really not enough time to speak to any of these values properly. So we're going to extend the length on these to a minute apiece for each candidate. I apologize for that. Hadn't really thought this through. So on that note, we'll move on to the second key value of the Green Party, and that is social justice and equal opportunity. And the Green Party believes, as a matter of right, all persons must have the opportunity to benefit equally from the resources that are afforded to us by society and the environment. We must consciously confront in ourselves, our organizations, and society at large any discrimination by race, class, gender, sexual orientation, age, nationality, religion, or physical and mental ability that denies fair treatment or equal justice under the law. So if you could, let's start this time. Actually, Brett, we'll go with you. Let's go one into the other. Brett, go ahead.
Okay, I get a twofer. So social justice cannot be separated from the provisions, the conditions that meet our basic rights as human beings. So acknowledging the basic rights to food, to shelter, to a clean and safe environment, to adequate educational opportunities as a key focus is really foundational to creating a socially just and environmentally just society. Beyond that, we do need to really increase the provisions for citizen oversight of our justice system. So justice system reform and also reform of our welfare system to a more asset-based approach, as I mentioned, so that you can start to see how these values start to intersect, where recognizing the value of each human being, no matter what their socioeconomic status, as the gifts that they bring to the table, the human potential, is one way of cultivating social justice in a diverse society.
So I think that social justice is one of the most important topics right now that the Green Party has to weigh in on. Right now, what I've seen is that we have a lot of issues with equal access to justice in our court system. So there are wide disparities based largely on racial lines and on economic lines as far as people's access to justice. I think that we also need to make sure that our immigration policies are compassionate, that we're dealing with our privatized prison issue. So I would say that privatized prisons should not exist in Ohio. Punishment should not be a for-profit business venture. And when we do things like criminalize people in our society, we're really holding our whole society back from making progress, from getting the education that we need to have a healthy, striving society and a qualified workforce.
So when I think of this, I'm thinking about the huge disparity we have within our schools. And I think this is highlighted by the fact that we have over-enrollment in all of our magnet programs and at Walnut Hills, and we have serious under-enrollment at all of our neighborhood schools. When we look at the enrollment at Walnut Hills, it's almost exclusively from our magnet programs. Kilgore is the one outlier that we have. And the question that comes to my mind is, are the magnet kids that much smarter than all the other kids? And I'm pretty sure the answer is no to that. I think we need to ensure that we have an equitable opportunity for all of our children in all of our schools. We need to invest in our neighborhood schools like we have in our magnet programs, but not turn all of our neighborhood schools into magnet programs. We also need to support those in our community that are most in need. And I think the community learning centers and the health centers that have been put into schools are a great start, and we need to expand that.
I agree with everything that's been said so far. I have always been a champion of social justice, and I'll be specific. I mentioned that I've had a small business for almost 20 years. My clients have all been nonprofits. NCCJ, for those of you who are a little older, was one of my clients for years, and then we helped them change names to Bridges for a Just Community. And social justice entails many things: race, sexual preference, religious type. All of those things are included in social justice, and I still live it. I participated in interfaith trialogue of Christians, Muslims, and Jews, and have done many things in this field. And specifically, I think it's really important that we decriminalize drug use, because I've been talking on that topic. I will mention that that is something that's very important to me. Thank you.
So the basis of all social justice is economic justice. There is no social justice without economic justice. We need to create more affordable housing, as an example, for economic justice. We need to end homelessness, which we can do. We need to end police brutality. We need to have a statewide LGBT rights. Just to mention with regard to Christopher Smitherman, I grew up with Christopher Smitherman, just so everybody knows. He's a close friend. And he appointed me to the NAACP Executive Board as the community coordinator. And under this NAACP, we fought the red light cameras and won. That's an economic injustice. We fought the trash tax and won, another economic injustice. We fought the privatization of our water, obviously an economic injustice. And we fought not one but two mega jails back to back, year after year. And all of these things were referendums, and none of these things would have happened without Christopher Smitherman at the helm of the NAACP.
Okay, thank you very much all for those responses. Greatly appreciated. The third Green Party key value, it'd be ecological wisdom. The Green Party believes that human societies must function with the understanding that we are part of nature and not separate from nature. We must maintain an ecological balance and live within the ecological and resource limits of our communities and of our planet. We support a sustainable society that utilizes resources in such a way that future generations will benefit and not suffer from the practices of our generation. And to this end, we must practice agriculture that replenishes the soil, move to an energy-efficient economy, and live in ways that respect the integrity of natural systems. So if we could start with Brian at the end, speak to ecological wisdom and what it means to you as a candidate and as an individual.
Sure. I've been an environmentalist for 34 years, first starting the Earth Company at UC, restarting it. We have fought the Fernald uranium processing plant, which gave thousands of people cancer here locally. We fought it, and we closed it down. I know Dorsey will remember that, too, with Gordon and Reverend McCracken, who was my mentor, who was arrested there. I own a green construction company, so we put in solar panels, geothermal, employing second chance workers. So in one fell swoop, by installing or creating this WPA that I'm speaking of, similar to the Depression-style WPA, we would install solar panels on affordable housing, using and employing second chance workers, ending energy poverty, saving our environment, and eradicating poverty in our city. Thank you.
First of all, I, of course, believe in climate change and have full respect for our natural resources and think we should do everything we can locally. I, as a personal story, volunteer at Rockdale Academy as the founder of Girls with Pearls. And just last week, the school, as part of Vision 2020, became a conservation, global conservation program where the kids are all focused on global conservation, healthy me, healthy world, with partners like the Cincinnati Zoo, Cincinnati Children's Hospital Medical Center. And it's phenomenal, and I think that all children need that kind of education at a young age so we can turn the tide on some of these issues. Thank you.
So, as a parent, I've noticed when my kids come home from school, they've been learning a lot about ecology and recycle and reuse. They have through that forced me to make some interesting changes in our household. I think that's great, and I think we need to expand that. I think that one of the things that we need to do in our schools is to ensure that the curriculum in all of our schools focuses on the evidence, the best evidence we have available to us when determining what to teach, whether it's agriculture, energy, etc. And I think that, as a school district outside of the curriculum and what we're teaching our students, we need to keep investing in more energy efficient buildings. That saves money and it's good for the environment.
So one of the main things that I notice in the political dialogue when it comes to talking about the environment is it seems like so often workers are pitted against environmental objectives. And I would just say that this is a divide and conquer tactic that is being used against the people, and that it's a false conflict. So I think that it's not true that you have to choose either workers and jobs or the environment. So we have examples here today of people who have started green construction companies and are putting people to work in green energy fields. So in the Kasich administration, Governor Kasich turned down millions of dollars for green energy projects, a train rail system between the cities that would have been environmentally friendly, created jobs, and provided good transportation. So I think that we need to end the exploitation of our natural resources for profit, and remember that we cannot do anything without our basic air, water, and soil. Water is life. We need it to live, and we need to protect that here in Ohio.
So ecological wisdom is another one of those really foundational values because it involves an appreciation and an understanding of complexity. And the problems we're facing now, like climate change, are complex problems where unless we understand the interconnection of things, we will not be able to get to it. That means supporting systems thinking in the schools. That means supporting a robust science education curriculum, but one that is holistic and not reductionistic as we've seen in many cases in the past. One that employs all aspects of human intelligence to solving problems, and that includes the arts as well as the sciences. We also need to borrow our wisdom from nature by looking closely. Biomimicry is an up-and-coming discipline. Permaculture, and these help us to embody the qualities of robust and healthy natural systems, climate resilience, sustainable agriculture, so that we can get at those big problems such as we see with the Lake Erie algae blooms and with fracking, which is really a blight upon this state, and it's only going to get worse unless we push back hard.
Excellent. Thank you all very much. We're going to mix things up a little bit here, and we're actually going to start with Tamie on the next issue. The next Green Party key value would be nonviolence. It is essential that we develop effective alternatives to society's current patterns of violence. We will work to demilitarize and eliminate weapons of mass destruction without being naive about the intentions of other governments. We recognize the need for self-defense and the defense of others who are in danger, but we promote nonviolent methods to oppose practices and policies with which we disagree, and we will guide our actions towards lasting personal, community, and global peace. And so we'll go with Tamie to David down to the end, and then have Brian go to close things out.
Okay. This Green Party value seems like it should be absolutely everyone's value. But I will say, if you can't tell yet, I am all about prevention. Drug prevention, homelessness prevention. Let's spend the least amount and do what causes the least amount of disruption by stopping an issue before it gets out of control. So violence prevention is something that I think, we have some programs in our community like Cincinnati Police Department's SERVE program, which is the Cincinnati Initiative to Reduce Violence. And those kinds of programs are based on collaboration and partnership. And I think that we can do more. I am very supportive of this value and will work to focus on violence prevention.
So when I think about this in the context of our schools, the immediate thing that comes to mind is the problem we have with bullying in our schools, and it's gotten significantly worse since we were kids. I think what we need to do is have the district partner with the local LSDMC and staff to understand the extent of this in each school. It's going to be different in every school. And as the chairman of the LSDMC at our children's local school, I am championing this. We need to understand the root cause instead of treating the symptom. And we need to put a focus on teaching our students nonviolent methods of conflict resolution. Violence should be the last resort, not the first resort. And I think that's all I have to say about that.
All right, one of my focuses would be on the demilitarization of our police forces. We have seen, unfortunately, a lot of violence coming from the government directed against the people. Recently, the Trump administration decided that they were going to allow military-grade equipment to be given back to local police departments. As a candidate for governor, I oppose the National Guard being used against pipeline activists. So Kasich sent our National Guard to suppress the activists and Native Americans who are trying to protect our clean water. And I think that instead we need to use the National Guard for disaster relief. As far as the local police forces, I think that we need to have a focus on nonviolent de-escalation tactics with also a focus on preventing the loss of life for both police officers and civilians. And also, I think that I'd like to promote community-based programs to prevent violence. Thank you.
So in addition to that, I think that we need to really adopt nonviolence as an active practice of peacemaking, okay? Instead of stating in the negative, it's really an affirmative. We need to fight against white supremacy as a form of consciousness, and that begins with acknowledging it, that it's not just with the neo-Nazis or the fascists that you see getting all the media coverage, but it's woven throughout many of the institutions and structures in our society. Until those of us of the white and particularly male variety, like myself, speak to that and acknowledge that, we're not going to get to one of those really key root causes to violence in our society, because, as was stated previously, violence results from the social inequality and the gross injustices that follow from for example, extreme wealth inequality, extreme segregation, and so forth. So we need to break the cycles of violence, and we need to adopt affirmative practices of dialogue that lead to healing and truth-telling in order to become a more peaceful and just society.
The best way to end the violence on our streets is to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour. The more social justice you have, the less criminal justice you will need. it's just very obvious that if a person is making $30,000, $40,000, or $50,000, it's unlikely that they're going to be robbing people, selling drugs, or engaging in any other kind of criminal activity. In 2002, George Bush came to our city to, for the first time, use the term weapons of mass destruction, which of course never existed. But the ensuing war killed well over 1 million people, Iraqis and other people. In October, that was 6 months prior to the war starting, when Bush came to town, was arrested at Cincinnati Union Terminal, nonviolently sitting down. I'm a disciple of Gandhi and Martin Luther King and my mentor, Reverend Morris McCracken. And that's all. We got 30 seconds. We're done.
All right, thank you very much, everybody. I greatly appreciate that. Next, we're going to actually go with Connie and work our way towards David and then finish with Brett. The next key value of the Green Party that we're going to focus on is decentralization. This tends to mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people, so this should be very interesting what everybody's responses are. Centralization of wealth and power contributes to social and economic injustice, environmental destruction, and militarization. We seek a restructuring of social, political, and economic institutions away from a system controlled by and mostly benefiting the powerful few to a democratic, less bureaucratic system. Decision-making should, as much as possible, remain at the individual and the local level while assuring that civil rights are protected for all. So, Connie, if you could please start.
So I think that a great example of decentralization have been some of the local citizen initiatives. We have the Community Bill of Rights that is asking to be able to make those decisions at a community level. For instance, whether companies should be able to come from out of state and do fracking and injection wells. So we definitely support the community's ability to decide whether they want decriminalization of marijuana in their city, and we have seen some of those local decrim initiatives, as well as efforts for Community Bill of Rights. I believe in self-determination for communities, including people of color communities. I think is very important. And at the Green Party, it is not a top-down approach. We want people to have access to democracy, to be able to make decisions, and to use direct democracy to make community decisions.
So running for school board, I'm going to talk about this at a more day-to-day practical level. Each of our schools has a different culture. They have different strengths. They have different challenges. And I think what we need to do is partner with the local schools to find the solutions that are right for them while remaining part of the whole. Key to that is ensuring that each of our schools has an active LSDMC. I know that's not the case across the board. And as a member of the school board, I would definitely drive to making sure that that's the case. We should push autonomy to the schools where it makes sense, but we need to make sure that they are remaining a part of the whole.
I'm going to focus on the economic injustice part of this. I wrote an op-ed recently, Work Toward Equity, Start Cultural Trend. And I specifically said, as a member of Cincinnati City Council, I will be a strong partner for business and community development initiatives in our African American neighborhoods, work to attract higher paying jobs, support neighborhood engagement that builds capacity to leverage human capital to solve problems, leverage community support for minority hiring and entrepreneurship. I would work closely with Cincinnati Public Schools to keep children in school, work with the Hamilton County, the Urban League, and others to broaden the jury pool to include real estate taxpayers and Ohio driver's license holders, and continue to lift up African American women and girls through mentoring to provide access and opportunity for all. Thanks.
I'm all with Connie in terms of neighborhood self-determination. Neighborhoods should have the right of self-rule, and that's about as low down, I guess, as you can be on the grassroots for self-determination. I was part of the community plan to create a community plan for Over the Rhine in Cincinnati. And as part of that plan, we included, and it's in a 1-inch thick book, it was moderated by Xavier University over a 2-year period, and we included 40% affordable housing in Over the Rhine. But what do you see in Over the Rhine today? Maybe 1% of affordable housing in Over the Rhine. So what we need is legislation to force our legislators to abide by the community plans that the communities make, so we spend all this time and not have the city council, in this case, to abide by the plan of the community.
So this is a point of intersection with ecological wisdom, because decentralization is reflecting diversity from a geographic and from a social standpoint. If a problem can be solved at a local level that takes into account the unique characteristics of place, the unique resources available to that local community, then that's where the problem should be tackled. Think of it as levels of systems. This is not to the exclusion of larger systems that we need, but we really need to design our solutions from the bottom up. And that means strengthening local home rule. It also means looking at those systems that are currently really monopolistic. Our energy system is controlled by just a few entities. Our financial system especially is controlled in a very centralized way, and so we'll be speaking about community-based banking and community economics, but that's really key to decentralization. And also, we would advocate for community investment funds, particularly where you have public sector resources that are being sold off, rather than just privatizing. Hand them over to the community. Let the community decide what to do with those common resources.
Very good. Okay, next we're going to go to community-based economics, the 6th key value of the Green Party. We support redesigning our work structures to encourage employee ownership and workplace democracy. We support developing new economic activities and institutions that allow us to use technology in ways that are humane, free, ecological, and responsive and accountable to communities. We support establishing a form of basic economic security open to all. We call for moving beyond the narrow job ethic to new definitions of work, jobs, and income in a cooperative and democratic economy. We support restructuring our patterns of income distribution to reflect the wealth created by those outside of the formal monetary economy, those who take responsibility for parenting, housekeeping, home gardens, community volunteer work, and the like. We support restricting the size and concentrated power of corporations without discouraging superior efficiency or technological innovation. So let's start with Brian on this one, if you could.
I'm going to go back to Over the Rhine again, because what happened in Over the Rhine was such a tragedy, and it could have been such a beautiful dream. Over the Rhine could have been a place where we did create 40% affordable housing, where we have a city or a county that's lacking 40,000 units of affordable housing. It could have been a place where we had African-American businesses, incubators, entrepreneurial support, utilization of African-American contractors. It could have been such a beautiful thing, but instead what we have is essentially a yuppie playground with a glitzy streetcar running through it. And what we need to end is the 3C DC style of development, which our city, thank you so much, which our city council has adopted as their method of community development, which is all wrong. Everything about it is wrong. Thank you.
Which way do you want to go? Okay, all right. I think that this is all about entrepreneurship, innovation, technology, the incredible startup ecosystem that we have in Cincinnati. I would rather be more of a partner with what's going on and try to create the partnerships that will provide more opportunity for the people who are underserved and living in poverty, provide much greater access to all of this that's happening, and that would be something that I would stand by absolutely.
So I'm going to approach this a little differently and look at it from a student's perspective. I think I'm going to come back to strengthening our neighborhood schools. When I grew up, I went to a neighborhood school and I could walk to school, and I felt like I was a member of the community there. That is not the case now. Parents feel like their only option is to send their kids far away from school, drive or bus in very time-consuming ways. I think we need to create a situation where parents feel that they can send their kids to their neighborhood school, where the children have the ability to walk to their school, and so they can feel more connected with their neighborhoods. They need to feel like they have pride in their neighborhood and feel connected with the neighborhood. And if you have that, everything else stems from there.
Right. So I want to promote green, local, and small businesses. So as far as small businesses, I support Black entrepreneurialism. And I think that also as a self-employed person, that it's really important to make sure that people who are self-employed or starting a business have some of the benefits that they need, like health care. So universal health care will allow people to start some of their own businesses, to work in cooperatives, to start cooperative businesses, and allow people to be self-employed. I also think that we need to bring the money down by providing a fair wage for workers so that we're bringing some of that money down into the lower and middle classes. Also, as far as local business, I think that we need to end some of the tax abatements that we give out to out-of-state corporations. So we have a lot of big businesses coming in from out of state. We give millions of dollars away to these big businesses that exploit our economy and our workers here in Ohio. And that's taking money away from the schools and from social programs that we could have to support people locally.
So, and this is a strategy for how we get, go ahead.
Thank you.
This is how we start to get at the at fundamental wealth inequality that is at the root of so many of our problems. We do need a progressive tax policy. And the reason for that, among others, is that the taxes need to align with where the real value is created. And that's through the hard work of people, largely at the community, at the small business level. We have an economy that has become financialized, where the wealth is not true wealth; it's just wealth on paper, based on trading of the stock derivatives and financial instruments. What we need to do is to support community-based banking. We need to support co-ops. Create a favorable regulatory and financial climate, microfinance, working with what we already have, such as the local community development corporations. And we need to involve the citizens in the development of an economic vision for their communities, because, as was mentioned, wealth is really more than just economic wealth. So we need to value caregiving. We need to value all those intangibles as well, including sharing of food, urban farming, and so forth, which can be really a place to start at the root of developing a local economic system that is viable and resilient in this era where resilience is going to be so important.
All right, thank you all so much. The next key value of the Green Party that we're going to discuss is feminism and gender equity. I think it would be appropriate if I have one of the women start this particular round of questions. I'll start with Connie. According to the Green Party, we believe that we have inherited a social system based upon male domination of politics and economics. We call for the replacement of the cultural ethics of domination and control with cooperative ways of interacting that respect differences of opinion and gender. Human values such as gender equity, interpersonal responsibility, and honesty must be developed with moral conscience. We recognize that the process for determining our decisions and our actions are just as important as achieving the outcomes that we want.
Thank you. So just a little bit about myself and my background. In my undergraduate studies, I was a philosophy major with a minor in women's studies. So I have a background in women's studies, and I consider myself a radical feminist. Now that I'm an attorney, I find myself often representing a wide variety of people. So, I'm often representing men in domestic violence cases. So that gives me an interesting perspective. I think that we need to acknowledge that our current system of patriarchy hurts women and men. I think that as a feminist candidate for governor, I can bring a spirit of cooperation and consensus into our government, a spirit of compassion for the people that we're dealing with. Also, I would like to see Ohio be one of the first states to come out with a positive statement promoting gender-neutral bathrooms. We need to make sure that everyone has the right to use a restroom, to use a public accommodations. This is a public accommodations and civil rights issue. Everyone needs to be able to use a restroom, thank you. And so in schools, I think that we've seen that millennials and younger people are increasingly more and more supportive of gender nonconformity. And I think that we need to follow this trend of the younger people and allow people to really truly express themselves for who they are, that we're not going to say who you have to be or how your gender expression has to be. We want to make sure that everybody's comfortable, everyone's able to be themselves, and that we're creating a fair system for everyone regardless of their gender. Thank you.
So I'm the proud parent of 3 daughters and a son, and my wife and I have made a very conscious effort to make sure that when we're teaching them things, we don't pay attention to, we don't treat them differently based on their gender. And I think in our schools, we need to make sure that we have common standards for expectations of rules and performance. We don't treat our children any differently, and we shouldn't do that in our schools either. A very concrete example where this comes up is dress codes. We have different standards when it comes to girls versus boys, and those should very much turn into a neutral standard. This one seems very clear to me. I don't have a lot to say. I mean, I get it.
One of the reasons I decided to run for office is only 20% of elected officials at the local, state, and federal level are women. And if not me, who? I just felt like I had to step up. I've done some things very recently. I graduated from the Joanne Davidson Leadership Institute in May. She was forged the way in the state of Ohio as the first woman to be Speaker of the House. I am also endorsed by the Cincinnati Women's Political Caucus, which I'm very proud of. And on a day-to-day basis, I mentioned earlier, I'm founder of Girls with Pearls. It's a program at a Cincinnati public school, Rockdale Academy, and I believe it's very important to empower girls. I raised boys, and so this is my opportunity to spend time with girls and have them realize they can do whatever they want.
Obviously, we all know that women make about, I don't know, what is it, 79 cents or whatever on the dollar that men make. We need equal pay for equal work. We need to pass legislation for this. As I said, my mother was president of the Women's Political Caucus, one of the founding members, and the vice president of the National Organization for Women. So I'm very proud of Together We Will and United We Stand, which are the new feminist organizations that are women-led and need to stay women-led as far as I'm concerned. And we need to pass the ERA. The ERA was never ratified. So we need to continue to support women's rights in every way. In every way. Thank you.
So we need to build capacity in our efforts at all levels to promote a shift in our policies away from an emphasis on extraction and on dominance towards collaboration and generative problem solving, because it's those different approaches, the different consciousness that goes into those approaches that is the result of the feminist critique of our current cultural paradigm. And so policies that reflect that, including equal pay for women and an end to the commodification of women. Now this is something that is something that all are responsible for. So government and the language that we use as leaders in government needs to be a place to start, but also we need to encourage that in the media culture, as well as in other avenues of communication like the social media, where misogyny is making a comeback because of the anonymity. So it's really revealing, just like we're seeing a revelation of white supremacist thinking, we're seeing a revelation of misogynistic thinking, and we need to talk about that and work through it as a society.
Okay. Very good, everybody. Next, we will talk about the 8th key value of the Green Party, respect for diversity, which I don't have memorized, and I just missed it on the screen. Here we go. We believe it is important to value cultural, ethnic, racial, sexual, religious, and spiritual diversity, and to promote the development of respectful relationships across the human spectrum. We believe that the many diverse elements of society should be reflected in our organizations and our decision-making bodies, and we support the leadership of people who have been traditionally closed out of leadership roles. We encourage respect for all life forms and increased attention to the preservation of biodiversity. And so on the issue of respect for diversity, we'll start with Tamie. If you could go first and work your way this way.
First of all, Cincinnati is our region's epicenter of diversity, and I believe that for our city to really thrive, to really get to the next level, that we need to embrace equity and just and fair inclusion that should be a core principle at all times. When it comes to diversity, I mentioned earlier, I believe in all of it. LGBT, religion, immigrants. My dad is the son of Greek immigrants, so my roots are very connected to an immigrant population. I remember my grandmother very well, and I just want us to go back to the America that is more inclusive of the diversity that we have. Which way am I going?
So I believe that all of our students, regardless of race, gender, sexual identity, religion, socioeconomic status, on and on, need to have the opportunity to do their best. We need to recognize that we all have differences, but we have the same rights and should all be treated with respect. Diversity in our schools shows that there is a big world with people of different backgrounds, and we need to embrace the experiences and challenges that come from those different backgrounds. We get better solutions when we look at the problem from different perspectives, and by having groups of diverse individuals, you come up with better solutions. And I think that's critical to start teaching from an early age.
So I live in a very interesting neighborhood. My neighborhood is very diverse. It is a historically African American middle class neighborhood, and more recently there has been some gentrification, which has been an issue in our neighborhood, but we've seen a large gay and lesbian population. So my street has African American and white families, gay and straight people on my street, and I think that it's an example that we can live together in harmony. We do not have to play into some of our history of racial hatred and all the divisiveness. What I would like to say is that in order for us to be successful on saving the environment and creating the society that we want to live in, we need everybody. So we need the skills of women and African Americans and the LGBT community in order to be successful. We have diverse skills, and it's also an underlying principle that we need to respect. I think that there's the ends and the means to the end, and that this is a good way and an important way to secure what we need to achieve by being inclusive from the outset, and we should have a good result coming out of that. Thank you.
When we talk about diversity as being our strength, we're not just talking about diversity as having a lot of difference among us. We're talking about diversity with interconnection. That's a sign of health. That's what we can see in healthy ecosystems. It's not just like a grouping of plants. It's the fact that they work together as a robust ecology. Even in our own bodies, we are learning nowadays that having a diversity of the biome in our intestines and in our system generally is part of what keeps us healthy. How could it not be the same way in society in general? And so we need to. How does that play out? We need to learn how to reach out and for us to go into spaces and places that we are not accustomed to. Last night I was at an arts festival in the African American community in Cleveland. I was one of only, I think at most 4 white people in an arts program that I would have missed out on had I just adhered to the kind of the segregationist mindset. And so it's an appreciative reaching out and a willingness to embrace the values of our diversity. And it also comes with holding the tension that arises. A pluralistic politics means that one where we need to be able to engage in dialogue across our differences, not always agreeing but appreciating that those differences will help us to see into our blind spots.
Like I had talked about before, we are the 5th most segregated city in the nation. And for us to have integration, I mean, Cincinnati's been around, a couple hundred years, or more than a couple hundred years, and we haven't had integration yet. But in order for us to have integration, we have to change the heart of the city. We have to have very intentional integration. We have to have planned integration that's purposeful. We're not going to integration is just not going to happen, leaving the market to itself. Because what we have when places like 3CDC are in control of our city's planning department, they do not have inclusive, what I want to create, inclusionary zones where we have affordable housing, which will create diversity, creating an affordable housing trust fund, which we need, we would get the money from the property tax rollback, which would be about $3 to $5 million per year, just to put into affordable housing, which would go a long way towards integration.
Okay, thank you all very much. The 9th key value of the Green Party is personal and global responsibility. We encourage individuals to act to improve their personal well-being and at the same time to enhance ecological balance and social harmony. We seek to join with people and organizations around the world to foster peace, economic justice, and the health of the planet. And for this, we'll start with Brett and work our way towards that end.
Okay, I think this one is very straightforward. As we speak, we have yet another hurricane descending on Florida, and it's very clear that we are in a climate crisis, and that this presents an existential challenge to human civilization. We happen to be in a bit of a Garden of Eden here in Ohio, relative to some of the situations that exist in other parts of the world that are affected by climate change. So we cannot succumb to isolationist thinking or to withdrawal as our current federal leadership is advocating. We must stay engaged as part of a global community, but in a different way. We must abandon the neoliberal model, which is really just neocolonialism. We need to approach our role, our responsibility that in part comes from the historic role of the United States in the global economy and our imperial past, but to do so in a manner that is entering into true dialogue with other nations. And we can start with, for example, agriculture, not ending the colonization through patenting of seeds and a number of other measures that are too numerous to mention at this point, but we need to stay engaged globally.
So I would like to encourage community-based efforts to get people more involved in politics, and I think that that's something that we do with our local citizens groups in politics and at the Green Party. So we are offering people another choice and another way to get involved. And I think that a lot of this stems from our focus on the environment, that, it's what's expedient is not always the best way to achieve things. So we need to be responsible in how we manage our natural resources and our business and resources. I think that it's fair to say that we're pretty much all self-interested, but to me, one key value is that I believe that my self-interest also lies in others. So I believe that by promoting the interests of others in our society at large, that my individual self-interest is also promoted. So I think that we allow people a way to get involved in politics and in our communities and take responsibility instead of just begging other politicians to change things the way that we want to. We're allowing people to actually get in and take action on our own behalf.
So I'm going to look at this from a student's perspective. And as a parent, one of the things that my wife and I try and instill in our children is that they are responsible for their actions. They are responsible for doing the things that they need to do to be part of our family and part of our society. One thing that I think a lot of our teachers do well is encourage the children to take responsibility for things like their homework. They don't want to hear from the parents. They want to deal directly with our children. And I think that's the healthy thing to do. So you learn that you are responsible for your actions. We also need to make sure that our students recognize that they live in part of a larger society and need to understand how they fit in. One of the things that I think we need to expand more is volunteer hours. It's a great way to become a part of your community and reinforce that you are a part of something larger, whether that's community hours or something that a few of us participated in this week. One of our local high schools requires students to participate in a political campaign as part of their U.S. government and history class. And I think those are great things, and we need to expand that.
I'm going to take this opportunity to speak personally for a second. I'm a yogi. I take yoga. I try to meditate. I think that mental health is something that we really need to pay more attention to, and I believe that we will all benefit by that. I also think that civic duty is something that we've lost sight of, that community engagement, neighborhood engagement is something that we need to be teaching our children in school and at home, and to keep people more involved and engaged in what's happening in their community and their world. And I believe in service learning. I was working with St. Vincent de Paul when we started the Ozanam Center, which is where people can come, not travel to Mexico, but come into their own urban core and learn about poverty and what that's like. So those are some of the things I've done and believe.
Just in terms of, global responsibility, when I first got into social justice and I was taught to think globally and act locally. So I was also taught there's not, 7 billion of us on Earth for us to live these quiet lives of desperation and just be little money-making machines and then die so we can have on our gravestone, he sure did make a lot of money and then died. So I think we are our brother's keeper. I think that it is my responsibility to do everything I can, all the good I can, for as long as I can. And my life was saved around the time I was 18. I was an addict. I was put in jail. I had a grand jury warrant for my arrest, which indeed I was arrested and placed in a cage, and finally into drug treatment, and eventually on my own accord, not from any of that actually, because professionals in general can't help an addict. I wasn't helped by professionals, but I was helped by an individual who, like me, was saved from a life of living hell. And when he talked, I knew he knew what he was talking about because he felt the things that I felt. And that is what changed my life. And so that is what we need more of.
Thank you all. We're on to the last key value here of the Green Party. Real quick question: do we want to give everybody? Anybody want to take a brief break at all? Finish the 10th key value. Maybe take 2 minutes. Everybody take a real brief break because we don't want to lose viewers on our live stream. Anyway, the 10th key value is future focus and sustainability. And we'll start again with Brian at the end and work our way this time. And the Green Party believes that our actions and policies should be motivated by long-term goals. We seek to protect valuable natural resources, safely disposing of or unmaking all waste that we create, while developing a sustainable economics that does not depend on continual expansion for survival. We must counterbalance the drive for short-term profits by assuring that economic development, new technologies, and fiscal policies are responsible to future generations who will inherit the results of our actions. We must make the quality of all lives, rather than open-ended economic growth, as you just said, Brian, the focus of future thinking and policy. So in regards to future focus and sustainability, Brian, could you touch on that, please?
Sure. I run a green company, and green means many things to many people, and you'll hear all kinds of people talking about green as an example. But green, to be truly sustainable, there's the 3 E's or the 3 P's, people, planet, profit. So it's not actually just about the planet. It's also about people. So you can't have, a green, like if my company was green, but I wasn't hiring second chance workers, that's not green, because you have to include the workers, and the workers have to be paid a living wage. I have been an environmentalist for many, many years, and there are many things that are considered, when we talk about sustainability, we're just thinking about green and the environment, but actually poverty is not sustainable, because eventually what will happen if people are made poorer and poorer and the rich are richer and richer? Empires fall, and this one can too. France, the U.S., Russia. You can't have this extreme economic inequality. It is not sustainable. And what we need to do is to create affordable housing. We need to pay a $15 minimum wage to create economic equality and have a sustainable country.
For sustainability, I think we need smaller government. So I am an advocate of not continually growing government. And for sustainability, we also need to have true structurally balanced budgets that look forward and backwards to maintain sustainability into the future.
So when I think about this, I think about it at 2 levels. One, at a global level, something that bothers me deeply as a parent is our current students have never known a world without an ongoing war. I think we also need to recognize that global warming's real. It's supported by evidence, and our children are going to inherit this. At a local level, much more day to day, Cincinnati is growing our student population. That is a wonderful thing. But we have, because of that huge inflow, we're going to have capacity problems, and we're going to have to deal with a future shortage of seats in our schools. We also have an increasingly aging teacher population, and we are not bringing in enough new teachers to replace them. And we need to have a pipeline to deal with that. So I think we absolutely need to have curriculum and policies that rely on the best evidence and data. We need to examine the implications of those and understand unintended side effects. And we need to encourage thoughts on how we solve problems.
As far as a future focus and sustainability, I really believe that we need to involve young people in our government decision making, and to encourage the participation of millennials in our electoral politics. So I think that we've really seen that with the current two-party system where they're basically locking a lot of people out of decision making, they're also doing this to young people. And I think that young people and millennials almost have an intuitive grasp of the future focus and sustainability, because the future generations will have to live with the decisions that we make today. So when we're making decisions that exploit the environment and leave nothing left for the future generations, that's something that they have to live with. So I think that in order to do this, we need to make sure that we have a good public education system so that the younger generations can have the skills that they need to build the world that we would like to see.
As a father of two millennial daughters, I'm acutely aware of the burden that this generation is carrying when we can no longer take for granted the fact that they can even believe in there being a viable future. And that concerns me greatly. It's not enough at this point to simply talk about minimization of impact or trying to strike balance. We need an active and proactive program of restoring our ecological foundations that will be the resources needed for there to be a future worth living. And that means conserving and rebuilding our soil. It means protecting our water system. It means planting trees. It means saving seeds. It means doing all these things at all levels in the urban and the rural environment. And we also need to address those ticking time bombs that are ready to go off. The waste of all this fracking is the numbers are staggering, and there's this toxic carcinogenic waste that's being stored in local communities all across Ohio with no place to put it, in concrete and wood containers that are eventually going to break down and leach out into our system. So we need to look at these things not in a reactive way, as has been the habit in politics, always reacting to the crisis after it occurs, but to look ahead and address these things before, because we cannot afford to have these time bombs go off.
Okay, thank you very much, everybody. That's the conclusion of the 10 key values component of our forum here this evening. We actually do have some online questions that we could begin asking, and we were, what's that? Well, we're done with it, right? So the online component of the questions, if you guys would like to take a break, we do have a couple questions that would be very specific to Brett and Connie. They're more statewide and general Green Party questions, and as local candidates who aren't necessarily running in a statewide race as a Green, maybe they wouldn't be quite as suited for you. So if you want to take a break, perhaps. Connie, let's see here. What would you say the biggest difference between the Democratic Party and the Green Party is?
Well, one of the biggest differences between the Green Party and the Democratic Party is that we do not accept corporate donations. So while we may have some similar interests or similar values, there may be a lot of voters who vote Democratic that their values are not necessarily reflected by what their party is actually doing. So I think that in the Iraq War, we saw that the Democrats did not stand up against the war. I think that Democrats have not necessarily done a good job standing up for women's rights and civil liberties. And as a Green Party candidate, I really feel that the value of being with the Greens is that I'm able to stand by my principles, and I don't have to worry about corporate donations and whether or not I'm going to, receive donations or something like that. We really have nothing to lose as far as that goes. We are funded by the people, and we come from the grassroots. We build from the bottom up and want to empower people. We're not accepting the same corporate money that the Democrats and Republicans are getting. Thank you.
Brett, you want to go ahead and answer to that as well?
Sure. Just to build on that idea, I think really the basic difference is that we are, in the Green Party, we are speaking clearly and boldly about fundamental problems with our system and the need for fundamental revolutionary change, whereas the Democrats are really committed to incremental change, at least the institutional Democrats, because in part because of their being corporately funded, but it's also because structurally, when you're trying to get that 51% of the vote, it encourages that kind of incrementalism and overly cautious approach to policy advocacy that unfortunately has led to a slow drift to the right in our political system. And so it's really taking a short view, whereas, as we were just talking about, to take a long view means we need to really address those fundamental issues such as wealth inequality, social justice, and ecological sustainability, which is at the core of our Green Party values. And one other thing I'll say about that is we are not issue-driven, we are value-driven. The issues and the policies we take up are practical solutions that derive from our values, and for that reason, we have a solid anchor that we can go back to whenever a new problem or a need to actually change our policy solutions arises, because we're sticking with our core values.
Very good, very good. Let's see here. Here's another good one for Connie and Brett to take. What do you say? I would even be willing to take this myself, but I'm not a candidate at the moment. So what do you say to those who feel that the Libertarian and the Green parties helped to elect Donald Trump? I mean, my quick answer would be Barack Obama beat both Jill Stein and Gary Johnson with no trouble in 2012. So, but anyway, Connie, what would be your response to that?
Yeah, I understand how people may feel about that, but I really think that that is not factual. I think that from what I've heard, I really think that if the Democrats had had a candidate that people really supported, that they could have elected them. And I know that there were many issues in the primaries. A lot of people wanted Bernie Sanders and felt that he was unfairly shut out, or that there were a lot of issues there. So I would just say that if the Democrats had had a strong enough candidate, that they could have gotten elected. And yeah, that's about it.
Well, the fact that we keep confronting that argument also points to the need to reform our political system. And as Greens, we advocate for a different voting system, a preferential voting, where no person should have to go and choose between the lesser of two evils in a zero-sum, winner-take-all system. The fact that both the Democrats, but particularly the Democrats, exploit that issue with regard to any third-party challenge because it's in lieu of them having a positive vision for the future. If they had that, it would expand the voting base, and we wouldn't have only 21% of the electorate actually electing our candidates in the governor's race.
It's very good. Yes? Yes, you do. We're still alive. We're still alive, Michaela. Let's see here. Here's a good one. It's a general Green Party question. Either one of these would be good. What are your plans to establish this party as more mainstream, especially with having a reputation of being uncompromising?
All right. So right now, the Green Party is in a phase of pretty healthy growth. And one thing that we're doing right now is we're working on coalition building. So I know that there are a lot of activist groups out there, a lot of citizens groups who have issues that they care about. And I would just say that it's important to vote, but voting is only one day a year. And that everything that people do in their daily lives to create a better world, whether that's community gardening or organizing a protest against police brutality, that is all really important. It's important to organize for labor rights and for our civil liberties and human rights. So basically, the Green Party is trying to reach out to groups, do coalition building, and maintain our ballot access so that we can allow activists to run as candidates and talk about the issues that they care about. And we're hoping that a lot of these issues will actually become part of the mainstream dialogue by having Green Party candidates talk about these issues. So we have the activists. We want to allow activists to run for office and use that the electoral politics as a platform to promote their issues. And hopefully this will result in unifying the left and building our party and getting the word out. I would say that a lot of people don't even really know what the Green Party is. So at this point, our our task is to get the word out that we exist, that we have this great platform of our 10 key values that is so important, and it's really what defines us politically. So regardless of your former political background, whether you're a Democrat or Republican, formerly, or a socialist, we want people to feel that they can become a part of the Green Party. Okay, so the question was about gerrymandering and what having a Green Party candidate will do to deal with the issue of gerrymandering. So currently, I think what we see is that there are so many gerrymandered districts that it's pretty much a given that a Democrat or Republican is going to win that district. So by running Greens, we can really throw a wrench into the system. And one of the main problems with gerrymandering is that a lot of times it's the party leadership who are deciding who is going to run in an uncontested race. And this really takes a democracy away from the people. So we want to ensure that people have the right to have the candidates of their choice by voting in the primaries, that the elections and democracy that we have presents a meaningful choice to people. So as Greens, we want to offer people another option of someone to vote for or a way to get on the ballot. And I think that hopefully by disrupting the system in that way, that we can win elections and get people to reconsider how the gerrymandering is done.
Okay, we're going to move on to a few Cincinnati candidate-specific questions after having a few statewide or more Green Party-specific. Do we want to do some of these first? Actually, let's leave this one for David. David, should GED classes be offered free to Cincinnati residents again? I have been told that they used to be free and would be a huge help for people struggling who usually have lower paid work and studying.
Yes.
Okay, fair enough. If you don't need 30 seconds or a minute, you don't need 30 seconds or a minute. That's good. What would be a good general question for everybody here? What can be done on a local level to encourage the creation of wind and solar farms? And that actually could be for all five of you, to be honest, if anybody cares to reply. Let's start with Brian down at the end. I believe this is kind of your forte, correct?
Yeah, so we can spend money on them. Like Connie's been saying the entire evening, we need to bring back the renewable energy credit to Ohio. For Ohio, that meant everything. It actually was 30% tax credit, where say if your solar array or whatever was $10,000, you had 1/3 taken off of it, meaning $6,600 plus the federal government already has 1/3, so you'd pay 1/3 for your solar. And I know the question was about solar farms or wind farms. We do have solar farms and wind farms, and ultimately all of our energy is going to need to come from solar. Ultimately we all know that coal and oil and natural gas are going to end. So we have no choice at some point, and so we might as well start now, because it is these things, indeed, the production of these energies, which is killing our planet.
Okay. Does anybody else want to answer to that? Tamie?
I'll pass.
You'll pass? That's fine.
Just real quick, I think one of the things that we need to encourage is more STEM education to make all of these technologies more efficient. The Apollo program, I know that's a tired analogy, but it encouraged a generation of engineers, and we need that type of excitement around renewable energy sources so we can come up with more innovative solutions.
I think the question points to the design of our energy system, and there's a way that you can do it that is centralized and and lends itself to continuation of monopolistic power by the energy companies. And there's a way that you can do it that is more community-based. There's an appropriate level of scale that will optimize efficiency. For example, community-level power grids. We also have. This is an area where we have the solutions at hand. If you go to groups like Clean Energy Ohio that have many prototypes available, if we have the energy credit and the portfolio standards and so forth to incentivize really the transition to a clean energy Ohio future, what we can see is a more modularized and more distributed, more recyclable system using technologies that can be not only installed but maintained by with a minimum of training. So we can create an enormous number of jobs. There's a pathway to do that, and it's happening at a small level. So really the issue is just bringing that to scale. To do that, we need a favorable policy regime.
One last thing, we need to socialize our energy. We all use energy. We all need to own the production of energy.
All right. Let's see. Do you want to do this one first or this one first? Okay. How would we make being more environmentally friendly easier for those who are struggling to feed their families? This is a general question for each of you, whoever wants to take it.
Well, I think that we have enough food to feed everybody in our society. Corporations throw away millions of pounds of food every year, every month. So I think that we need to make sure that we have food programs for individuals, and that we need to really work on the social equality, make sure that people have their basic needs met, that they have their needs for health care and good education, that we have preschool programs so that young mothers can go to college and have a safe place for their children, and that by providing for these basics, we are going to allow people to be able to make better choices in their lives.
I would add that neighborhood gardens and food co-ops are also wonderful options in our Cincinnati neighborhoods and communities.
Fund the Cincinnati WPA project that I'm promoting, which again puts solar panels on affordable housing, ending energy poverty, and protecting our environment and employing second chance workers.
Well, just in terms of the opportunity, we really have a window of opportunity with regard to some of the properties that have been in the wake of the foreclosure crisis condemned and repurposed. We have, up in the Cleveland area where I'm from, emerging local food system that involves a transportation service to link food hubs. Part of what I read in that question is that when you just place the burden of becoming sustainable on the individual or the individual family, it seems very daunting. But when you have cooperation between communities or members of a community, then you can accomplish a lot more, such as training, helping, in the context of a community garden or otherwise, to incorporate a training and an educational component to that in addition to the market-based growing.
Okay, we're going to move on to another question here. This was posed to the Green Party of Hamilton County's page, and the question is posed to the Cincinnati candidates, I think specifically City Council. What would you do to fund and improve the Metro bus system to provide connectivity to jobs, reduce dependence on cars, and to have cleaner air?
I am endorsed by the Amalgamated Transit Union, which is the bus union, and so I follow the bus union's lead, because anytime you have a problem, the people who are most intimate with the problem or the people who are affected with the problem need to be the people who are creating the solution. And in this case, what the Amalgamated Transit Union, the ATU, feels is that we should continue to fund the bus system with the 1/3 of a cent, part of the 2.1% tax which everyone pays, which is an income tax. So we should maintain that. But in addition, we should also include somewhere between 1/4% to a 0.5% on a sales tax for our city, because our city bus system is facing huge deficits, and that's not sustainable. So we need to fund public transportation. It's a social justice issue. If people can't get to their jobs, or if certain people can get to their jobs, but other people can't get to their jobs because of transportation, that's a social justice issue. I would go on to say that we need to fund it through a 7-county funding system, where all these counties who have jobs are putting money into the busing system. So then you'd have a 3-source funding, which would be sustainable, and we could expand our bus system.
The sales tax that Brian's talking about is being proposed countywide, so that would take the burden from being off only the city to shifting some to being on the county, which makes a lot of sense, because when the buses first started, the jobs were downtown and the routes, the geography was smaller. Now there are jobs beyond the city borders and possibly, definitely beyond Hamilton County. So we need regionalism when it comes to public transportation. We also need to be thinking towards the future. I am very much a supporter of SORTA and the metro system, and believe that we need to update it, reinvent it, whatever we need to do to make sure that it's not seen as just something for poor people, but it's seen as something that younger people are wanting, young professionals, the millennials now want to ditch their cars and ride public transportation. We want to make that doable in this city. We want to be a 21st century city. But we also need to think to the future, where we're going to have driverless cars and some other new technologies that are coming down the line not too far in the future.
Okay.
So just really quickly on that one.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, so one of the biggest ways our students get to school is on metro buses. As a kid, I learned how to ride the bus, and I found it very empowering. When I started working downtown, I would take the bus. When I started working out in the burbs, that was no longer possible. So, I think we need to work with the city as a school district to figure out how we do better busing, both to support our students and to build a lifelong love for riding public transit.
Yeah, even though that is a local issue, I guess real briefly, Connie, if you'd like to speak to what you would do as governor to assist local communities with their bus systems, perhaps? I guess it does kind of tie into a statewide issue.
Yeah, I think one thing that we saw with the Kasich administration is that our state was able to get a lot of money for a rail system, and he turned that down. So I guess just looking at it statewide as far as our public transportation, I think that we have the ability to create a transportation system that would allow people to move between cities, so that if somebody needs to work in one of the other cities, they can have a good commuter rail system. So that's something that I would like to promote. I also am a bus user occasionally in my own city in Columbus, and I know that our bus service is pretty poor as far as the timing of the buses, the availability and the routes of buses. And so I do think that that is something that needs attention as a social justice issue, to allow people to get to the employment they need. And just so that we're taking it from the level of providing community resources for everybody to use, instead of looking at public transportation as something that is only for lower income people and that doesn't deserve our investment in. I think that it certainly does deserve investment in. It's something that can benefit everybody.
Okay, real quick for Cincinnati candidates, would you, where is it? I just lost it. Would you introduce a no fines, no time penalty for all misdemeanor marijuana offenses while on council?
I would legalize, I would end the racist drug war. What has the drug war done? I mean, and who are these prisoners of war? Largely African American people. Today, my son is one of the prisoners of war. He was sentenced to 6 years dealing with the marijuana case in Ohio. Hopefully he'll get out soon. But these are years lost putting someone in a cage dealing with a plant. Oh, you sold a plant. We're going to lock you in a cage. It's barbaric. Certainly you're not rehabilitating anyone by putting him in a cage. And we have to end the racist drug war. And absolutely, I would legalize marijuana. Hello.
I also agree with decriminalizing drug use, and am definitely in favor of medical marijuana use, and I know we have it coming down the pike, and I'm very happy about that. I've spent a long time in drug prevention and treatment advocacy, so I'm more cautious about legalizing another drug. We already have alcohol, and but I want it to be available for people who need it medically. I wish the federal government would step up and create laws that are clear for the whole country and would also research marijuana, which we need to be doing.
Okay. Yeah, I think real quick here, because we are running kind of short on time. I know that Brian and Tamie both have other engagements to get to. I would like to give everybody that's here presently and took the time to come this evening, I really appreciate your presence here this evening. If any of you would have questions that you would like to pose to the candidates, I would appreciate it. Oh, go ahead.
Well, the first thing is on your question about PR, proportional representation, which we did use until what, Mom, the 60s? 70s? So we used proportional representation here until the 70s, until someone decided that people of the people were getting elected too much. And so if you create a system wherein a person has to run citywide, meaning from the far west to the far east and the far south to the far north, why, that's a very expensive campaign. A very expensive campaign that a working person would find that very difficult to do. So I'm interested in districts. I'm also, heck, why can't we have 27 people on Cincinnati City Council? Why not, and within districts, why not elect them using proportional representation? Which is a weighted system, and you can look it up, but it's a weighted system wherein minorities and women and all kinds of people are more likely to be elected. So I would use the proportional representation within districts, and I would have probably something like 27 districts in Cincinnati.
I don't agree with having 27 city council members. However, I do agree with districts or wards. And you're not going to get many city council members who are going to say that, because it's not advantageous to me as a candidate. But I'm not a politician. I'm running to serve. So I would very much support having districts or wards. We are one of very few cities our size that still has 9 candidates at large. I don't know that much about that. I'll be honest. I'm speaking to what I know and what I believe.
Yeah, we'll bring you up to speed, Tammy.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll talk later.
Okay.
Well, from the you asked about 2 questions with regard to the platform. From the standpoint of our statewide race, the question as to whether we support proportional representation. We do, particularly for legislative bodies. So we're talking about the State General Assembly, where the composition of that assembly should really look like Ohio. This is part of our value of diversity. It's also part of our core objective of revitalizing our democracy. So we do strongly support proportional representation. We support preference voting, version of instant runoff voting for the where you're electing a single candidate like the governor, the secretary of state, and so forth. And that's another way of ensuring that voters actually are able to have their preferences counted in a proportional way, proportional to their preferences. So, that's a very clear position in our policy. You also asked the question about, in terms of addressing the gross inefficiency of having so much of a meat-based food system, where most of our agricultural land, if you drive across Ohio, is in corn to create feed, not just animal feed, but also other corn-based products for the industrial food system. My daughter's vegan. I've learned a lot about the health benefits of being vegan. I'm kind of starting to move that way myself. Also, as an instructor in sustainable agriculture, we have a great opportunity to address climate change, not just by reducing carbon emissions, but actually sequestering carbon. Something that all Ohioans really should understand is that we have as much carbon in our atmosphere as there is the equivalent of biomass on the planet Earth, and we need to bring it back down into the soil where it belongs. There's techniques to do it. It's called carbon farming, use of biochar, use of other techniques of sustainable agriculture that address that, but also helping to encourage more of a vegetarian-based diet, which is actually tantamount to encouraging a healthy diet. We have these superfoods that are high in nutrients, so it's all interconnected. Healthy soil equals healthy plants equals healthy people. And in the process, we might also address the lake pollution and other consequences that result from too heavy reliance on animal farming.
You probably know that methane reduction is the quickest way to turn that around, and animal farming is the quickest way to reduce that.
Absolutely. To repeat the question, the methane that results from extensive animal farming, particularly the confined animal feed operations, is a significant contributor to climate change, because methane is much more potent as a greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. So this is not to say that we're against the beef industry. Grass-fed beef and other ways of doing sustainable animal farming can be part of the mix, but not to the extent that we are doing it at an industrial scale currently.
Okay, very good. Does anybody else have any questions for the candidates this evening? No? All right. Well, I'll tell you what. We'll give all the candidates an opportunity to give a little closing statement about themselves, their candidacies, and then we'll go about our business. Do you want to go ahead and start? I know you're eager to get out of here. You got places to go. I get it. You're a busy man.
Well, I haven't been to the West Side, and I want to get to the West Side today, because I spent we had a tofu barbecue down in my office for our office opening. But so generally speaking, the reason I'm different from other candidates, and I don't think you'll find a single other candidate probably that was ever arrested, but specifically that was arrested for a good cause. I was arrested plenty in my youth for bad causes, but in my adult life, I was arrested, just as an example, stopping the war in Iraq, or attempting to prevent the war on Iraq, before it ever started. Then when the CIA-backed death squads were killing people in Central America and the U.S. was refusing to allow them into the country, but Canada was welcoming them, we helped them get to Canada. And we had to sit in with my mentor, Reverend Morris McCracken, sat at the federal building and was arrested there, and finally was arrested protecting affordable housing in Cincinnati on Garfield, trying to protect 115 units of affordable housing they were tearing down in downtown Cincinnati. And now, you know, all these things, looking back on them, right, society can see, okay, I was right about the Iraq War. There were no weapons of mass destruction. I was right about immigrant rights. And I was right about affordable housing. Good enough.
Okay, my name is Tamie Sullivan. I have a website, sullivanforcincinnati.com. I'm different because I'm independent. I have worked with a wide variety of people and collaborated my entire career. And if you look at the diversity of my supporters, you'll see how I value diversity and so many of the other things that we've talked about tonight. So please vote for Tamie Sullivan.
So again, I'm David Brenner. I'm running for Cincinnati Public School Board. I am not the typical school board candidate. I'm a parent and a professional, but I'm not an educator. I view this absolutely as an asset because we need a diversity of experience on the board. Somebody said to me this week that a vote for a Green Party candidate is a wasted vote, and I reject that notion. If we continue to vote for people with backing and the people that you think should win, we get more of the same. We don't get the change that we need. I think on the board we need the perspective of a parent. I am the only candidate running this year with children actually in the district. I have 10 years of experience with children in the district, and I've got 13 more to go. We face a lot of challenges with our school district. We have capacity issues. We have issues with collaboration and inclusion. We have issues with communication and transparency. The board's going to be saying over the next couple months that they're doing a lot of things to increase transparency, et cetera. I find it really interesting that that comes right before an election. With me, you won't wait 4 years to get change. I think that all of these problems that we have can be solved, and we need to work together to do so. And I hope I can count on your vote in November.
Okay, I'm Constance Gaddel-Newton, and I'm running for governor of Ohio. And I really appreciate this opportunity to be here with everybody today to talk about these issues. We need 3% in the governor's race to maintain our ballot access, but we can win elections in a three-way race with 35% of the vote. So this is going to be a very interesting election year leading up to 2018. We're going to have a lot of Green Party candidates on the ballot to offer voters a choice. And I do believe that by running candidates, eventually we will win elections. We can win with 35% of the vote, so just over 1/3. So we want to make sure that we're able to offer ballot access to progressives so that our voices are being heard and that we don't have to pander to corporate interests as politicians. Also, I would just say that Green Party candidates, we typically have the lowest cost per vote. So I think that this really shows that we have the support of the party, that we're not just buying votes. Right now in the governor's race, Republicans and Democrats already have millions of dollars that they're going to be spending just in the primaries to be the candidate in their race. Typically, Green Party candidates spend pennies per vote, where the other parties are spending dollars per vote, $8, $10 per vote. So, that's really not what democracy is about. Democracy is about representing the people and our political interests, and doing that from the level of grassroots democracy. Thank you.
So my name is Brett Joseph, and I'm running for Lieutenant Governor of the state of Ohio, along with my running mate, Constance Gaddel-Newton. And I want to thank Together We Will and the Hamilton County Green Party for holding this forum. It's been a wonderful opportunity to be able to share our various thoughts on the issues that face Ohioans. We face complex problems in Ohio that require really an all-hands-on-deck approach to unifying around the goals of universal Medicare, tuition-free education, safe, non-militarized streets, sustainable livelihoods and communities, and a vibrant, inclusive democracy that is free from the corrupting influences of corporate campaign finance. As you know, all of us in the Green Party do not receive corporate money. After a decade and a half of government service, I came to realize that our current strategies within the political establishment would be insufficient to prevent social and ecological collapse. This is our generation's first responsibility to seek fundamental changes to the underlying causes of social and environmental degradation, not just Band-Aid fixes. Like so many people across the state, I thought there might be no end to the hyper-partisan two-party standoff that perpetuates disunity and weakens our democracy. And I'm ready to say enough is enough. It's time for a nonviolent revolution. So running with the Constance for Ohio ticket, I welcome the opportunity and the honor to support the courageous and determined efforts of engaged citizens statewide. Like my running mate, Connie, and the party of candidates that you see here, we pledge not to accept corporate money, and we will bring new leadership to the governor's office, as well as all the way down to the local village councils, so that our state will be governed by and for all Ohioans who would then know what democracy really looks like. Thank you.
Okay, I'm speaking from the point of view of the Hamilton County Green Party, and I'm speaking specifically about our local candidates who use the word independent a lot. What you should have learned tonight is that, yes, they come from different points of view. This is a nonpartisan race. And in the Green Party, one of the things we do is work with people that we agree with on the things we agree with them on. One of the things we don't do is write some sort of dogmatic platform thing that you have to agree with it even when you don't. You have to follow it even when you think it's stupid. We do not do things like that. And I think from listening to our candidates tonight, it should be obvious why we picked them. They came from different backgrounds, but you can hear them blending together and supporting each other. And that's what happened when we did our forum over at Walnut Hills the other day. They asked people to move two to a table. We're the ones who moved. We had one candidate running late. We saved a spot, pulled them in, and immediately put them in with us. And that's how we do it. We work together. And that's what makes us different. We're not all running as individuals. We're running as a team. And we will work with anyone who's going to be doing the right thing. And that's where our track record has been coming. And that's what we expect from our candidates. And I believe you're hearing them do that tonight. And thank you for, one, coming to us and convincing us that you should be with us. I'm very pleased that you came and joined us. And I think we've got a really good thing going here. So thank you. And thank you to Nathan for all his work on putting this together.
Thank you very much, Gwen. I really appreciate it. I'm really grateful for all of you coming out this evening, and I'm also grateful for all of the viewers of our live streams. I hope you've enjoyed the experience, and I hope that we get an opportunity to do this again. Thank you again to all the candidates for making the time out of your busy schedules to come down here, especially to Brett and Connie, who had really long drives to get here, so I really appreciate your presence tonight. Thank you all for coming, and have a great evening. Good job. Oh, by the way, we have a healthcare rally coming up next Sunday. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention this. September 17th, Sunday at Pyatt Park. We'll be in support of universal health care for all. The Single Payer Action Network has a bill in the U.S. in the Ohio Senate and House right now. And we have a meeting coming up, third Thursday of every month at the Cincinnati Library down the street in Clifton. So that's it. Thank you all. Have a good night.